Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 18th, 2015, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and a hopefully relaxing, quiet weekend. I don't know. A lot of events going on right now. It feels like things are just totally spinning out of control right now. We have a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Looks like we've already got a call on the line here. I'm going to ask you to wait a few minutes because I want to start right out with developments in Ukraine. Now, the Minsk agreement basically got shredded by everybody, including Poroshenko, and I'll bet you he is regretting that right now because the Kiev forces have been driven out of Debaltsevo. This is now being confirmed by Kiev itself. And Poroshenko would have been well advised to say, I'm going to go along with the commitments in the Minsk agreement, and we will start pulling our forces back. They didn't. Now they're being driven back. And apparently there's still a sizable amount of the forces still surrounded. Russia Today is saying Ukraine forces retreat. Russia Insider, Debaltsevo pocket is crumbling. Ukraine forces in retreat. And I'm going to take this phone call before we get back into that. So we're going to take a phone call now. DJ in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Thanks for taking the call. I actually thought it was an hour into the show. I'm on East Coast time, so I totally forgot about that. But anyway, speaking on Ukraine, I was just, chatting with someone the other day out of the New York Times. Basically, when they were covering, they covered one story recently, made like their front page of how one of the Ukrainian generals, he's a neoliberal or neo-Nazi. They were talking about a victory they had in the battle, and I noticed how they had not shown any of the insignia, the neo-Nazi or the SS insignias, because they were just kind of whitewashed all that out of the story. And
that's because we're supposed to be the good guys, and we're not allowed to see any symbols that might indicate that, in point of fact, it is the U.S. and Europe that are the launchers of the current world war.
Yeah, it was, that was a big omission that people don't realize. These are some of the worst of the worst people. And, giving all that aid money to Poroshenko, he was a Ukrainian, mobster. He had a chocolate factory and all this, but he was also dabbling in, guns and drugs.
The chocolate factory is his business front. It's still showing huge profits in the middle of a country that is rapidly going broke here, and apparently it's a family business. His father was into some sort of that stuff as well. Anyway, listen, I want to get back to the situation on the ground in Ukraine. So thank you very much for your phone call, and I want to get back to what's going on because it looks like things are starting to fall apart. Another story from Russia Insider. The Ukrainian women are protesting. They want their men and their husbands and their sons out of Debaltsevo, and apparently they're staging these protests that are shutting down major highways around Kiev. Some of the traffic jams are up to 6 kilometers long. Because they want their sons and husbands back here. Story over My Catbird Seat. Kiev says troops withdrawn from Debaltsevo. Of course, the other side, the independent Ukrainian republics, are saying they're surrendering. They're surrendering en masse. It is a rout. And apparently we are getting these other reports that those Kiev soldiers who were not encircled, who are in retreat right now, are basically shooting everything they see as they go along here. This came out of VK.com, and we had to do a Google Translate on it because you're not going to hear about this stuff here in the American media. But apparently they are shooting women and children just on their way out. Scorched earth policy. They're just killing everybody. Real Nazi territory here. And still the American and British corporate media are out there demonizing Russia. Russia's the bad guy. They're guilty of daring to resist the American empire. How can you not want to be part of the American empire? Just look at the United States of America and see how wonderful life is here. Doesn't make sense they wouldn't want to be part of that. All right, we're going to grab ourselves into the phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, hi. This is another NATO, U.S., British blunder. They obviously have advisors in there, and they were advised wrong.
Well, the mercenaries are there for the money. When it looks like, they might not live long enough to spend the money, they tend to drop their guns and run here. It is turning into a flustercluck, and absolutely, beyond all shadow of a doubt, Poroshenko should have kept to the Minsk agreement, and he could have exited the military theater gracefully. Now it's a completely different story on the ground, and his own people are turning against him. We keep hearing rumors of a potential military coup. One report said that his own military leadership gave him till the end of the week to get out of this mess, or they're going to take him out. And there goes the entire U.S. NATO agenda in Ukraine and against Russia, which is, by the way, why we're seeing nothing about except ISIS on the American corporate media. They're not even talking about events in Ukraine. That's just gone away. It's all ISIS all the time. In fact, Fox News was running a story just when the show started about how ISIS is harvesting organs from people to finance their, just anything they can think of. And some of the propaganda is really getting desperate. There was this story over in the Mirror in Great Britain. The headline is this pro-Putin Brit fanatic plotting a Russian takeover of Europe. This guy is living in a second-story flat over a used car dealership, and they're trying to turn him into this new uber-Russian villain. I mean, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for this stuff to fling at us to say, they're bad, we're good, believe in us. And we don't anymore. We know who the villains are.
Well, Europe has nothing to offer. That's why Putin's looking east. What does Estonia and all these have to offer? Nothing. Lithuania, Poland, nothing. What do they have?
The private central banks have reduced Europe and the United States and a bunch of other countries to empty, dried-out husks where they don't have anything. Russia is making deals while the U.S. tries to make war. Apparently, Putin just met with the Hungarian prime minister. They had a very warm and cordial situation, extended a Gazprom contract to Hungary that was due to expire at the end of the year. Hungary's getting 60% of their energy from Russia. They're not going to support a European war against Russia. And this whole idea of, building a new Cold War with Europe and the U.S. against the Russian sphere, it's already falling apart.
I want people to look on a map of the Ukraine, look where Debaltseve is, and look at that railroad there. That's a very important strategic part.
It is a major transportation hub.
Mariupol. They got to take Mariupol because that's like a bridgeway to Crimea, right?
I thought they were already pretty much in control of that further south. I know the Kiev forces are retreating southward, but I don't think they're going to turn and try and retake that isthmus. I think they're just trying to get out of there right now, and it does.
This war is over.
Yeah.
At this point, this war is over.
I agree. Unless, remember, earlier in the week there was this one allegation that the U.S. was talking about setting off a nuclear bomb someplace in Ukraine and saying Putin had done it, but that's a non-starter. Why would Putin do that? Even a nuclear bomb, why just one? If Putin had ever wanted to come across that border from Russia into Ukraine, he would have been in Kiev 48 hours later.
Hope it ain't at Poroshenko's chocolate factory. There'll be a lot of hot chocolate. Thanks, Mike.
The hot chocolate, the marshmallows are flying everywhere. All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We got to take a break for commercial, and we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about developing events in Ukraine, which the American corporate media doesn't seem to feel you'd have any interest in whatsoever. Obama's on TV right now talking about we must counter violent extremism. This from the same president who only last week said that, yes, the U.S. uses its military force to twist other nations to do what they want. Well, isn't that violence? Apparently Obama's attitude is our violence is good and their violence is bad, and our violence is blessed by the imaginary playmate in the sky and their violence is in league with the other party or something like that here. Meanwhile, up in Canada, proving that Israel has succeeded in co-opting their government to the same extent they have here in the United States of America, Canada's Prime Minister has announced new anti-Russia sanctions, trying to keep up the pressure. They are desperate to get a war with Russia and China going by any means necessary. Looks like it's all falling apart over there. As I mentioned to that caller, Russian President Putin started a visit to Budapest, laid a wreath at the memorial to the Soviet soldiers who had died in World War II, and had a meeting with the Prime Minister, talked about energy primarily, and they extended a gas contract with Gazprom that was due to expire at the end of the year. Now, Hungary is economically dependent on Moscow for its energy, and they're not going to risk that to support this harebrained new Cold War plan. Now, here's a very bizarre story. This came out of prisonplanet.com. Apparently, Obama is going to give the so-called moderate Syrian rebels the equipment necessary for them to order and direct U.S. strikes against ISIS, even though this group is technically Al-Qaeda, and they've admitted they're kind of sympathetic to what ISIS is doing. And Obama's handing them the keys to the rocket launchers. I mean, this is just absurd. It's an act of desperation. And it is explainable by the fact that the Syrian army, Assad's forces, have now completely encircled Aleppo, which was the hub of Al-Qaeda/ISIS/hired mercenaries working to oust him. So, of course, as soon as that happened, NATO and the United Nations are out there saying, oh, it's time for a ceasefire, time for a ceasefire. Really, it's time for, yeah, this has gone along long enough. So it looks like Aleppo may turn into a rout of the hired mercenaries. They've been trying to get Assad for over 3 years now. Huge amounts of money spent. Destroyed the reputation of the United States as some kind of a moral leader. And, you know, incidentally, they've killed a lot of people who did not deserve to die. And they're still out there trying to make ISIS the boogeyman that we should all be so afraid of that our brains will not engage when we are told to throw what's left of our money and the lives of our children into invasions into every country with ISIS, which happen to be the oil-rich nations that refuse to run their economy in concert with American interests here. And now we're seeing this bizarre story. This came out of IntelliHub. ISIS plans to invade Europe through Libya. That's the new claim out there. And it's all being sourced from a single source, an anti-terrorism group that claims they got letters from somebody inside ISIS saying, oh, by the way, you know, I'd stock up on your French cheese and wine right now because we're coming to get you. We're coming to get you right now. How can they possibly know what ISIS is planning? Unless ISIS works for them, which seems to be a distinct possibility. Over at worldbulletin.net, they have a very telling article, The Libya Crisis Created by NATO Intervention. And they're basically going back and confirming what we've been saying all along. None of this confusion, chaos, bloodshed would have happened if the U.S. had not gone in and started overthrowing or invading other people's countries in order to dictate to them just what currencies they would use to trade their natural resources in. That's what this is really all about. And at this point, I think ISIS is a manufactured phony name that is now being applied to the people of any nation who are resisting U.S. intervention. What do you mean they're not letting us come in and take over? They must be ISIS. Send in the bombers. Now, Wesley Clark, who's the man who blew the whistle on this plan to literally conquer all the oil-rich nations on earth and re-enslave them to the U.S. dollar, has come out and said, basically, our friends and allies funded ISIS to destroy Hezbollah. It's another created group for covert action, just like Al-Qaeda was. Now, we're getting this story out of Egypt that a huge cache of weapons has been found on the Egyptian-Libyan border. And the Egyptian officials looking at it believe these are weapons sent by the United States of America to the terrorists inside Libya. And I told you, back when the U.S. puppet regime in Libya fell, I said the U.S. is going to have to figure out some way to sell a second invasion of Libya to you, the American people. And that's what they did with ISIS. That's just what they did with ISIS. And again, getting back to the absurdity of some of the propaganda that they're putting out there to get you to hate ISIS so much you're willing to see your own children blown to bloody bits to get them, was a story that came out of the New York Post. Female ISIS captives endure brutal and abnormal sex. And the article is very lurid about how ISIS is making their female captive prisoners dress up in sexy lingerie and then engaging in rough sex and all this other nonsense. Now, here's the point you need to remember. If ISIS are really Muslim, they're not going to behave like this. If they are behaving like this, they are not Muslims. I mean, Muslims, it's a mortal sin to look at a naked woman, not your wife. So if these guys are behaving like this, I mean, they're behaving like hired mercenaries who love to do this kind of stuff. And if they're behaving like that, that tells us they're not really Muslim. They're just somebody who's been put out there so the U.S. government can say, ooh, Muslim extremists, we've got to go kill them. So whoever ISIS is, they're not Muslim. Especially with that guy with the British accent doing the beheading. I mean, come on. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And talking about scraping the bottom of the barrel for anything that they can get traction with to get us all to hate ISIS like we're told to do. Somebody just sent me a picture they took off their TV set of CNN. And there across the bottom, on the bar, it says, ISIS lures women with kittens, Nutella. I gotta find someplace to use this image. I mean, talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. All righty, we're gonna grab a quick phone call here. Jay in Maryland. Aloha, Jay. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good.
It's an honor to speak with you. I had a couple questions. You mentioned about bin Laden and that the Pakistanis raided it first.
Yes.
And it wasn't. What's your source for that? Because I'd like to look into that more.
Was the Pakistani media. In fact, if you go to my webpage on the gallery of fake dead bin Ladens, the link is still there, unless it's been taken off the remote server. But the real issue, of course, is that when they said they'd gotten bin Laden, they flooded the Internet with all of these apparently very hastily made, very poorly done fake photos that were just, trivial to rip apart and expose. And, it's just another example of how this government has done what it does with lies, fraud, and deception for so long. They don't know any other way to be a government. And they're now trapped into this pattern of just, if at first you don't succeed, lie again. And the public now knows it. And if the government is unwilling to evolve to the new environment of a more skeptical population, then they're doomed to go extinct.
That's agreed. I saw a good documentary that I thought I'd point out called Adolf Hitler, The Greatest Story Never Told, which talks about a lot of issues that you've already brought up on your show anyway, but I thought I'd point that out to you and your listeners. Yeah,
I've heard about that one before. And again, we know that pretty much everything that we think we know about World War II was a concocted lie. including the reasons for the war and the history of the German slave labor camps. I think the people of planet Earth are waking up and realizing that they really do live in a matrix of illusion crafted by governments and corporations to keep us obedient, productive workers and breeders of soldiers.
And one last point, Mike, perhaps a little bit of a disagreement. You were mentioning yesterday about the 9/11 hijackers, something about Hamalata and dating strippers or something like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes.
What was that you said?
Yeah, basically that these so-called Muslim extremists were not acting like Muslims. And it's not just, what's his name, dating strippers. The night before 9/11, okay, these gentlemen were making the rounds of the bars in Manhattan, and they were just talking loud about how America will learn a lesson at the hands of Islam, and, accidentally on purpose left their driver's licenses there. And Muslims don't drink. And the mere fact that they were in these bars tells us they weren't really Muslims. And James Corbett has this wonderful video out about 9/11 and conspiracy theory that goes into a lot of this stuff, about how all these people that are being held up to us by the corporate media as examples of militant Islamic extremism don't behave like they're Islamic at all. They're not following any of the tenets of their religion.
That's true, but I would point out, though, that I have lived in Saudi Arabia, and I've met Muslim men who could outdrink me, and I've been sitting at the same bar stools with them in Bahrain and Dubai and places, and I think that's a bit of a simplistic comment. I think people, no matter what religion they are going to do whatever they want to do.
But we also know we live in an age where so many of these villains that we're being wagged at by the corporate media turn out to be complete fakes. I mean, I can think of no better example.
Well,
I can think of no better example, of course, than Adam Gaddan, the American Al-Qaeda. Turns out his real name is Adam Perlman, and he's the grandson of the member of the board of the ADL. We have seen so many of these fakes right now. The prudent assumption, anytime something is presented to us as this is another government lie until the government proves what it's saying to be absolutely true. And simply coming out and repeating it 1,000 times is not proof. It's an assertion. It's not a fact. And we have been lied to so many times about Saddam's nuclear weapons and the rest of it. At this point, only a moron is going to believe anything this government and corporate media says.
Well, I grant that. You make a lot of good points about that. I was just pointing out the other general statement about, people going to do whatever they want to do, drink, chase women, do whatever. People.
Yeah, but you're talking about businessmen in a bar, and we are being told that these so-called terrorists are fanatical Muslim practitioners. They would be the most inclined to go along with their religion if, in fact, they were members of that religion and trying to bring Sharia law to everybody. A businessman in Dubai, may say he's a Muslim the way a lot of people walk around and say they're a Christian in this country, but they don't really live it. And by extension, they're not out there blowing up people to get them to convert.
Yeah, it's true. They just want to live their lives and do whatever they want to do. I just had one last thing. Your website really cracks me up sometimes, and I think it was either last week, week before, you had a comment up there, which I can't repeat, about anger management. That had you
yeah, we have that. We have that on a T-shirt over at our Cafe Press store.
Oh, you do? Okay,
yeah.
That's awesome.
And the reason for that is we have heard so much in our society about anger is bad, anger management, keep calm, never let your feelings get out of control. But you need to understand that ability to feel anger and rage is what we evolved to do. It didn't just come out of thin air. There's a survival mechanism there that allows us to feel anger, to motivate us to deal with a threat to ourselves, our family, our home, our community. And when somebody does something that is angering to us, we should allow ourselves to feel that anger. We should channel that anger into constructive solutions. But, anger in and of itself is not a bad thing. Hate in and of itself is not a bad thing. There are people who do hateful things, and it's okay to hate those people. I hate liars in politics. I hate liars in corporate media. I hate cheats. I hate frauds. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And it's our human nature, and we do need to embrace that. We just need to direct it in a very intelligent, constructive path. Okay?
Fair enough. Thanks a lot, Mike. You have a wonderful show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. All righty. Now, As you're probably aware, a little while ago, there was a bit of a stink in Israel over the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu's wife was helping herself to empty bottles out of government offices and taking them for the deposit money, which isn't really a lot of money, and it seemed kind of absurd. But apparently Netanyahu is trying to sell the voters of Israel that he really is not very well off, and that's why his wife was doing it, and, you know, he's working for the people, and he doesn't personally profit from his office. And they released a video a couple of days ago where Benjamin Netanyahu's wife was showing the public around their home, into the kitchen, where the paint was peeling and the hinges were broken, and it really wasn't very good at all. And this has blown up in his face because it turned out that they were shooting this in the Netanyahu's servants' quarters, which are not maintained. And that's not where the Netanyahus live and cook and relax. It's the servant quarters. And now it's blown up in their face, and this may work against him in the upcoming elections. I mean, is there nothing so sick that they won't sink to that kind of a situation here, trying to present the servants' quarters as where Netanyahu and his wife live? That's tacky. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about this amazingly foolish stunt that Benjamin Netanyahu tried to pull, where they released a video of Benjamin's wife showing him around their poor quarters and home to show, we're just like you, we're just as poor as you, we're not, making money off of being the leader of Israel. And then it came out that they actually shot that video in the servants' quarters. And apparently the Netanyahus, in addition to the official residence, they've got a very posh estate over in Caesarea that they get away to. They're doing very, very well. But this is blowing up in Benjamin Netanyahu's face. In fact, Steve Imsel over at Desert Peace ran a story saying Netanyahu's political suicide via YouTube. Needless to say, the original video has now been Orwellized and is gone. Apparently the same thing also happened to that greatest story never told that the caller mentioned in the last segment, because I went to find it and linked to it and immediately found a notice about how Vimeo has shut down their channel and everybody's shutting them down and YouTube doesn't want it out there. I guess somebody thinks you might learn something in that documentary you're not supposed to know. Now, one other story, and I know we got callers, I'm going to get to you in just a second here. There was a bit of a stink where the Israeli Knesset arbitrarily declared two of the members of the Knesset, Hanin Zoabi and Baruch Marzel, could not run in the March 17th elections because they're Palestinian. We don't want their kind here. And to their credit, the Israeli Supreme Court has overruled them, overruled the Knesset. And so these two will be on the ballot on March 17th. All righty, we're going to start taking phone calls here. We're going to go to Steve in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got to laugh about that Netanyahu thing. I mean, he doesn't live by humble means at all. I mean, we all know, the educated know he's a Zionist. I mean, he's out of control. But my question to you is he still meeting, going before Congress in March?
Yes.
That's still going on?
That's still going on. It's going to be a live telecast with a 5-minute delay to Israel, but apparently it's going to be a closed-door session where the American media and public are being kept out. And so Netanyahu may get up there and tell a few knock-knock jokes, or he may just get up there and say, look, we've got all the dirt on all of you guys, and if you don't vote to go after Iran, AIPAC will be supporting other candidates next election. We don't know what's going to go on, but apparently it is going to be televised with a delay in Israel in order to allow the editing out of partisan comments in compliance with Israel's election authority.
I think it's been advertised well that he is going to meet before our Congress, and I think people who don't already know that Israel has a big hand in our politics and owns our Congress will understand that if a foreign leader like Netanyahu shows up to your Congress, there are demands, there's something going on, especially if you block out the media to actually record the conversation, what's going on. It all looks very, very negative, very bad.
Well,
and hopefully people will catch on to that.
Well, I'm sure that they will, and that's why some of Israel's staunchest supporters in the United States, including Abe Foxman over at the ADL, and Nancy Pelosi, We're all out there saying, don't do this, because it's one thing for Israel to be covertly controlling the U.S. government, and quite another matter indeed to rub the American people's noses in it. Because Netanyahu is basically showing up uninvited, because only the State Department, only the White House can invite a foreign leader to speak before Congress. Boehner is way out of his pay grade on this one. In fact, he's in violation of the Logan Act. And it is. Netanyahu has overplayed his hand. It's backfiring on him, and then, to top it off with this stupid, dumb video stunt.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over here to Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Good. Michael, always good to go to you to clarify a few things, get your opinion. I got two questions. First of all, what do you think the evidence or the satellite imagery, whatever that Putin's got on 9/11, what do you think that consists of exactly? And what do you think it would prove? And I guess that's it. That's good enough.
Okay, well, I've been looking at that story, and frankly, it feels to me bogus because it's all being sourced from these very gray sorts of areas. I mean, nothing's coming out of Putin's office directly. And the fact of the matter is that satellite imagery from orbit is wonderful stuff, but I really don't see where satellite imagery would reveal anything that tells us, who did 9/11. And I frankly, I don't trust that story.
Well, you remember he had the stuff on the Assistant Secretary of State with the Ukraine deal. They had the place bugged, right? Maybe he's got the Mossad on record or
well, that's hardly satellite data.
Right. But
okay.
I mean, maybe there's.
He may have something else.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, everybody who's actually looked at the facts understands this was the false flag event to launch the century of unending war that was being proposed as policy by the Project for the New American Century. And there are so many things wrong with the official story. I mean, nobody's buying it. And all the poison the well propaganda tricks like no plane at the Pentagon and the rest of it aren't working. And frankly, I think they were trying to get people to sign on to this thing. Oh, Putin's going to come out with satellite data that proves who did 9/11. I don't see how that's possible. And it just feels like it's trying to throw more dust into the air, trying to keep the confusion going, because what they're really worried about now is the majority of the American people sitting down and saying, yeah, I think the government lied about 9/11. And all agreeing on that. So they're trying to just get everybody constantly arguing with each other over fine details, because that's another propaganda technique.
So then when he doesn't come through with satellite image, it'd say, well, look, it's kind of a reverse psychology thing, huh?
That could very well be it as well. But I didn't have any credence in that story to begin with.
Very, very insightful. Thanks, Michael. Listen to the rest of the show.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now, a little bit of good news off the coast of Israel, at least for you science and history buffs. Apparently, quite by accident, some divers were diving off the coast of Israel, saw a flash of gold, thought it was a toy coin, picked it up, realized it was authentic, reported it to the archaeological authorities, which is a good thing. You want to preserve the history, and turned out to be 2,000 gold coins in different denominations dating back about 1,000 years to the Fatimid Caliphate, which ruled that area from 909 AD to 909, what do they call it? CE now. AD is old hat now. To 1171. It's an amazing archaeological find. I hope it winds up in a museum. But it also kind of undermines that whole this has always been Israel thing, doesn't it? All righty, let's see. Story coming out of Desert Peace again. Everything you wanted to know about anti-Semitism, but were afraid to ask. And it's basically saying that the time has come for the world's Jewish people to start countering Israel's constant attempt to blur the line between Israel's government policy and the world's Jewish people. Netanyahu was out there saying he speaks for the world's Jewish people when he talks before Congress, and you've got a bunch of American Jews saying, no, you don't. J Street is on record saying, no, you don't speak for us at all. And Israel tries to blur the line between their government's actions and the world's Jewish people so they can always shout Holocaust and anti-Semite and you hate the Jews to deflect criticism of their actions. But we're talking about the actions of a few individuals in a government. And it is not a reflection on the world's Jewish people. And Steve Imzell over at Desert Peace is saying it is time for the world's Jewish people to stand up and say, no, Israel doesn't represent me. I don't agree with what they're doing. And you're not going to set us up as targets to catch the flack when the world finally reacts to what Israel is doing. Because right now, propaganda about Muslims and terror and Nazis aside, the biggest threat to the safety of the world's Jewish people right now is Israel itself. Because of its policy of attempting to hide their political activity behind the world's collective Jewish population. But the world's Jews are not responsible for the actions of Israel, just like all the Americans are not responsible for the actions of the CIA or the Federal Reserve, just like all the world's Muslims are not responsible for the actions of ISIS, whoever they turn out to actually be. Got to take a break for our news, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2 here. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Yes, BAM user quit working again. Boy, the quality of service in this country is just going down the tubes here. I'm looking at the email, and a lot of people reacted to that caller who said, the Muslims drink all the time and everything like that, and they're taking issue with that. Here's one email. Just a comment on this caller's point. I know from personal experience you cannot get alcohol easily in Saudi Arabia. And if you do find it and are caught in possession of it, you go to jail. If you are a foreigner, your embassy has to get involved. If you're a native, you're really in trouble. Another email here saying, I'm not a Muslim, more an atheist with a belief in the teachings of Jesus. I'm a white man living, I'm not going to say where. We have a majority of Asians, mostly Pakistanis, so I interact with Muslims on a daily basis. My own experiences prove beyond doubt that most Muslims do not really care what others believe or care to change it, which is certainly true. I've known a lot of Muslims. They're not screaming that I have to follow their particular God. That's sort of another major religion that is really big on converting everybody, often at the point of a sword here. And last little email on the topic. You said that the ISIS guys dressing up women strippers in sexy underwear are not Muslims because of Islam's strict rules against such activities. Well, it goes further. The U.S. idiots running this fiasco are so stupid they don't know anything about Islam and its strict prohibitions. And their stupidity results in knowledgeable people easily recognizing this story as total moosepukky. And listening to the caller saying Muslims will behave any way they feel like. Wrong. Your response is totally correct. Islam is a very strict religion wherein practitioners do not do whatever they feel like. So a little bit of corrections on that. And remember, these so-called Muslim terrorists, we are told, are doing what they do because they are fanatical in their religion, which means they would be fanatical about following that religion themselves. So when we hear about the guy they killed in Abbottabad that we were told was Osama bin Laden, and we know he wasn't, because the real bin Laden died in 2001, and then they come out and they demonize him by saying there were porn videos all over the place. Well, then he wasn't a Muslim. Muslims don't look at porn. It is a mortal sin for a Muslim to look at a naked woman, not his wife. And now this story about they're taking their female prisoners and they're making them wear sexy underwear and engage in rough sex. Well, that tells us right there, whoever ISIS is, they are not Muslims. All righty. Getting on down here to other parts, there's a story out of Remat 1. Macedonia, Jewish lobby wants regime change. Now, Macedonia's been out of the news for a while, but it wasn't too long ago where they were targeted by U.S. efforts at covert overthrow. And apparently people like Victoria Nuland, McCain, Lindsey Graham, George Soros are once again saying, got to have regime change in Macedonia. They're not doing things the way we think they ought to be doing. Now, we've been talking a lot about the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, which is gaining ground across America and around the world. And more universities and student associations are adopting resolutions to divest investment in any company that is seen as profiting from the oppressions of the Palestinians. So over in Ohio, at the University of Toledo, they're coming up on a big meeting where students are going to argue in favor of that resolution. But the university's done something very strange and very troubling. The university administration is mandating it will be a closed-door meeting. So the resolution supporters, the opposition, and the general public will not be allowed to hear the presentations to the student government. Then, the Ohio University, University of Toledo, is saying the vote will be done by secret ballot, meaning that the student body won't be able to know how their representatives voted on the resolution. Well, that's not what's really going on. This is setting this thing up wide open to fraud. Everybody puts their ballots in a box, and somebody looks in the box and says, oh, resolution failed. That's it. End of story. By golly, they are teaching those college students the American way of politics, aren't they? All righty, we're going to go back to the phones here now. Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Rick, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Rick, are you there? Rick, are you there? Okay, I am not hearing Rick, so I'm going to put Rick back.
Hello.
Are you there?
Hello.
Hello, Rick. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Okay, great. Yeah, I was listening to what you were saying a little while ago about the separation of what motivated the Jewish people in relation to what motivates the Israeli government as being two separate entities.
Yes.
I read an article about the chief rabbi for Netanyahu, Ovida Yosef, who died, I think it was about a year or so ago.
Yes.
Now he's quoted as saying that all Gentiles are animals and their only purpose in existence is to serve Jews. And when he died, there was the largest turnout in Israeli history, and there was mourning all over the United States for this rabbi. And if you know anything about Jews, if they practice their tradition at all and relate to themselves as Jewish, they have a rabbi, and the rabbi is the one who, I guess, more or less does the thinking for these people. And when you have someone such as
Well, I'm going to stop you right here and now, because the reality is, if you look at any so-called holy text, you're going to find some pretty offensive, disgusting things in there. Whether it's the Talmud, which is what you're quoting from, or a lot of the stuff in the New Testament, it's there to find. And the question is, in the end, good people are going to do good things, and bad people are going to do bad things, and both are going to use religion as their excuse to do it. And the reality is that 90% of the world's Jewish people aren't really fanatical about it, just like 90% of the Christians aren't fanatical about it. And they sometimes hesitate at some of these more extreme things, but the ones out there promoting the extremism, yeah, they rise to the top of power, because by promoting that extremist view, supports the political agenda of, well, Netanyahu. That guy would not have been Netanyahu's rabbi unless Netanyahu wanted somebody to say, yeah, God wants you to go out and behave the way you're behaving. And so it's kind of a self-feeding situation here. And so again, you're looking at a governmental structure. It may have adopted the trappings of a religion, but it's still a governmental structure and governmental propaganda here. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Anthony in California. Aloha, Anthony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I usually call in every now and then.
Yes.
And I do appreciate the info that you give out.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask you about the police. There's been a rash of police shootings that I've been reading about on INFOWARS, and innocent people have been killed.
Yes.
This last incident where this guy just held a broom, he was mentally sick, and he was shot to death. And then after that, he was handcuffed on top of that.
Yes.
And I was wondering if it's because could it be that Department of Homeland Security which the Israeli security forces have influence over and have trained police departments, have they ordered police departments across the country to issue out psych meds to police officers?
Well, I don't know if they've ordered the police departments to issue the psych meds, but we do know that police use a lot more of those prescription psychiatric medications than the general population. That's part of it. Being trained by the Israelis to treat the American people like Palestinians is another. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, Anthony, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here now. Along with all the new sanctions against Russia and everything, still in the background is this push for more sanctions against Iran because they won't do things that the U.S., specifically Israel, wants them to do. Now, remember, that preliminary P5+1 deal was that Iran would curtail their enrichment below a certain level. They would stop work on other projects. Iran kept every one of the commitments they made in the P5+1 preliminary agreement. The United States committed to pulling back some of the sanctions on Iran, which it did not do. In fact, it ramped them up. And we're seeing all over the United States Congress, the finest Congress money can buy, especially if it's Israeli money, screaming for more and more sanctions. We've got to sanction Iran. We've got to give them what for. And so Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei basically came out and said, well, there's a reality you got to look at. If you put more sanctions on us, we're not going to send our gas and petroleum to you anymore, are we? And that is sending shockwaves through Europe, because Europe is already dealing with shortfalls over this whole Russia-Ukraine nonsense because of the U.S.-backed sanctions. And now Europe is being told by Iran that if they go forward with more sanctions against Iran, just shut the valve. We'll just shut that valve off right now. So, good move on his part. Alrighty, we're going to go back and grab a couple more phone calls. Paul in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike, with plenty of love to you, my friend.
Thank you.
You were mentioning like 90% of the Jewish people aren't extreme. But what type of percentage do you think say it's all right for the Jewish people or Israel to bomb Palestine? And what percentage of people about the 6 million Jews dying in gas chambers that I have researched for over 10 years? I've come to the conclusion that Germany had no gas chambers.
Well, we have rehashed this time and time again. Yes, we were lied to about World War II. Yes, we were lied to about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Yes, we were lied to about Spanish mining in Havana Harbor. Yes, we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. And we are being lied to by all these claims about how, you know, the vast majority of whoever are in agreement with the leader's agenda of XYZ. And I'd kind of like to move on from Israel. We're already into Iran, and I'm about ready to set foot in China. And so, thank you very much for the phone call.
I got something else for you.
Real quick.
I got something else for you. Okay. How about one of the things I always say, there's no hard proof that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. There's no hard proof that the Russian brothers did Boston Marathon bombing. There's no hard proof that we killed Osama bin Laden May 2011, May 1st. There's no hard proof of any of these things, and that's one thing that I like to say to people all the time. And I'm glad that you got the documentary up there, The Greatest Story Never Told. I just tried to hook on it. I got it on DVD now, and but the best book on that subject is A Myth of German Villainy by Benton Bradbury that I've read cover to cover. You know, it's at least a 30-hour read, and it's a very easy read though. And also, how about the reverse immigration? You know, Times of Israel just reported in 2014 that, yeah, we did come from Khazar, and if you look at Khazar, that's where Ukraine is at right now.
Yes.
So maybe there is some kind of reverse immigration trying to be held there. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's a weak concept because the push.
Weak? I think that's the main one, if you really think about it.
Okay, you want to hear my response here? Okay, the reason the Zionists wanted Palestine at the end of World War II, they were being offered, much nicer places to live all over the world, including all of Madagascar. But their drive to Palestine and Jerusalem was rooted in their religion. There is, in fact, nothing in Judaism that has any kind of a link to Khazaria or Ukraine or Crimea or that whole area. It is certainly a very attractive place to live, but I don't think that they're going to get a tremendous amount of interest of general population moving there. Now, that's not to say that Israeli businessmen are not going to be up there trying to buy things for pennies on the dollar. They certainly did that in Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein. But that's economics and business, not religion. Okay?
But they have a lot of agriculture and the water supply over there in Ukraine, which is south of Russia, basically. So that's they could feed the other people around, the rest of their tribe around town. But I think that's a big motivational factor. I haven't heard anything about that.
Obviously, I disagree here because the primary agenda that is driving the U.S. toward these wars is to protect the U.S. paper dollar from the rise of the ruble and the yuan. To basically conquer all the world's resource-rich areas and force them to sell those resources only for the U.S. dollars, which forces anybody who wants to buy those resources to borrow those dollars at interest from the U.S. Federal Reserve. And that is the primary motive. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there saying, how would this war suit me? Because wars are never started for just one reason. What you do is you find a group of people who all want the war for their own personal private agenda and profit, and when you get enough of them, the war is basically going to happen. Anyway, Paul, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to try and fit in Frank in London before the commercial break. Aloha, Frank, what's on your mind?
Mike, how are you? I've got two questions. One in regards to Ukraine and the women protesting about their sons. I think this has been going on for a long time, and the mainstream media have basically ignored it. Because I remember sometime last year on watching something on RT where they had people trying to recruit soldiers and motivate them into joining the Ukrainian army, and a lady was asking, well, where is her son? He hasn't been paid. We don't know where he is. And stuff like that. And he turned around and said, think about the glory of the Ukraine. And she basically told him, you should go forth and multiply. I want to know where my son is, basically.
Yeah, that's a very polite way of putting it there. Well, yeah, the protests have been going on all along, but what makes today significant is these women are now literally putting their bodies in the lanes of the highways and stopping traffic. And they're just bringing the entire highway system around Kiev to a crashing halt.
Yes, I can see the situation is pretty desperate. Now we hear Poroshenko wants to impose, he wants to impose martial law. That means it gives him the leverage now to go around and get conscripts and stuff like that, force people into joining the Ukrainian army.
Well, soldiers who are forced into the army are not effective fighters. They never have been. And there's another aspect here. These Ukrainian conscripts are not trained and skilled with the American weapons that are being given to Poroshenko. And that means they're going to be sitting there saying, how does this work, while the other side comes in and bats them over the head. Frank, got to let you go for a commercial break, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And zipping on back to Russia and Ukraine, I'm looking at an article out of Fortress Blogspot. The headline reads, Horror, Darkness, Fire, and Death. The Agony of Debaltsevo Cauldron, and there's a very telling tagline in there. The cauldron will cease to exist in a few hours, a day at the most. Novorossiya's army has taken most of Debaltsevo. UAF and volunteer battalions have lost their headquarters, are acting in an uncoordinated, chaotic fashion in order to save themselves. Many of the soldiers who have nothing to fear, draftees and reservists, are laying down their arms. DPR, LPR is mentioning hundreds of POWs, but that's only the beginning. Most of the prisoners will likely be captured today or tomorrow. So it's a rout. The people, apparently a large number of Kiev forces are still completely encircled, and they can either surrender, figure a way to break out, which they haven't been able to do, or allow themselves to be killed, and I don't think they're going to go for that option. This is a rout. This is a horrible disaster for Poroshenko. And, of course, not a mention in the American corporate media. It's all ISIS all the time, and Islamic extremism. We've got to go out and cleanse the world of all those icky-poo Muslim-type people. Now, we were talking earlier about how some of the propaganda is really getting obvious and desperate out there. And as you know, once the U.S. succeeded in getting into a conflict with Russia to protect the dollar from the ruble, there was going to be this Asia pivot to get China into some kind of a conflict situation to protect the U.S. dollar from the yuan and the renminbi. And so I saw this story earlier over in the Telegraph. Hong Kong leader tells people to act like sheep. And the article starts off, Hong Kong's unpopular chief executive has infuriated pro-democracy campaigners by using a Chinese New Year message to urge the former colony citizens to act more like sheep. Harumph, harumph, harumph. Well, this is very much out of context. We are at Chinese New Year, and next year is the year of the sheep. And while we here have a very negative connotation of sheep just following along and, to their utter destruction here, the Chinese culture has a different view of them. All of the animals in the Chinese astrological cycle represent positive traits. Sheep represent calmness in the face of chaos. That's how the Chinese see the sheep, and it's a positive thing. And the Telegraph said, oh, he used the word sheep. We can use that to make it sound like he's establishing his tyranny. And by the way, for those who are interested, I was born in the year of the dragon. Alrighty, interesting little story. This came out of Market Daily News here. Is Washington fabricating the economic data? Is this a trick question? Of course they're fabricating the economic data. They don't dare tell the people the truth of how bad things are. They want to keep their phony-baloney jobs up there in Washington, D.C., otherwise known as Sodom on the Potomac. We know for a fact they have been lying about the unemployment numbers. Oh, it's 6%. No, it isn't. When you have a total population of a little over 300 million people and 93 million Americans willing and able to work, cannot find a job, it doesn't work out anywhere close to just 6%. So yeah, they're lying about the data. They're lying about all of it, trying to keep it going, trying to reassure you that everything's going to be just fine if you'll stay in your homes and work hard and give your money to the bankers and the federal government and breed new soldiers and all will be well. No, it won't be. Story out of Investment Watch blog. Circular logic. The EU wants Greece to borrow more money from the EU so they can turn around and repay that money back to the EU on the earlier bill. In other words, the bailout that is being offered to Greece won't actually help the Greek people one tiny bit. In fact, the earlier bailouts, 80% of that money immediately went to the bondholders, to the money junkies. Story here out of Reuters, no less. Iceland convicts bad bankers and says other nations can act. And that's something else you're not going to see on the TV news here in the United States of America. Iceland has thrown more of the crooked bankers from 2008 into prison. And they're now going out there and saying, you need to start rethinking your allegiance to the bankers, this too big to jail mentality. They're not. And things get better when you take crooked bankers and you take away their money and throw them in prison. Things got a lot better in Iceland after they started throwing their crooked bankers in prison. So why isn't our government doing exactly the same thing? It's because those bankers write very generous campaign donation checks every election cycle. We can't offend the donors. Anyway, story out of Ex Republic TV. This is coming from Peter Schiff. The Fed's quantitative easing, for the most part, just sloshed around Wall Street and didn't, in fact, do anything to help the national economy. They're just printing up money for themselves to play with on Wall Street. It's like monopoly money, just keeps on coming. Anyway. Another story coming out of the Daily Sheep, a complete breakdown of all economic activity, and this is definitely someplace where the government is trying to conceal the problem. The Baltic Dry Index continues to decline. It is sending a red flare up into the sky that the system is just shutting down. We, the people of the United States of America, have had all of our wealth taken away by the money junkies. We don't have anything left to go down to the shopping mall and buy things with. That means the shopping mall is not placing orders for new manufactured goods. That means the manufacturers are not ordering new raw materials, and that's why the Baltic Dry Index is going down. And Washington, D.C.'s answer is not to try and fix the economy and get new wealth flowing down at the bottom of that badly cracked pyramid, but to just go on and say, everything's fine. Really, trust us. Everything's fine. Absolutely. Anybody who doubts that everything is fine, well, you're suffering a mental illness. Anyway, apparently the EU and the ECB have sent another ultimatum to Greece. Either agree to what we say or we'll issue another ultimatum. I think if they keep going on this path, Greece is going to start taking Russia's offers and overtures very, very seriously. Right now, the EU and ECB are operating on the belief that Greece absolutely would never want to leave the European Union. And I think that is a very, very bad assumption. It's flawed reasoning. The ECB and the EU have given Greece, and for that matter, Spain and France and Italy and a bunch of other countries, a lot of reasons to want to leave the EU. Story over on alternate.org talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty, about how this is all about making American corporations richer, and it's going to harm ordinary people because more of our jobs will be going to other countries where people aren't paid as much because they're not taxed as much and the cost of living isn't as much. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get back to the real news here, a little bit of an observation. Ukraine is collapsing. Kiev is collapsing. It's a rout. Poroshenko's forces are surrendering, deserting, running. They're turning on him. What is Fox News reporting here just before we went to airtime? How there was an amazing contestant on Wheel of Fortune who guessed the hidden message with just one letter. Wow, isn't that amazing? That's really kind of cool. Boy, talk about being conditized. Wow. All right, getting back to the economy, getting back to the corruption of the money junkies, which is now rampantly on display to all of the world because of the HSBC scandal. And for those of you who only got out of the monastery yesterday, we're dealing with this major banking system that set up a special tax avoidance system for the rich and powerful and celebrity, also dictators and arms dealers, and who knows what all else is going on in there. Well, of course, the government is going to go in and find out what's going on and give them what for. Well, apparently not, because Prime Minister Cameron has rejected calls for an inquiry into the handling of some 3,000 suspected tax evaders who were using HSBC's little scam. So far, only one person has been prosecuted. And this tells us Obviously, the government is not going to clean up HSBC because too many government officials were involved. It was their little pet project. Here we are. Now, over at the Telegraph, their chief political commentator, Peter Osborne, has resigned, saying that the HSBC coverage by the Telegraph is a complete fraud on the readers. And he's now gone public saying that the Telegraph was biasing its reportage on HSBC in order to preserve advertising revenues coming from the financial sector. And we have seen this before many times, where the corporations will go to these corporate media outlets, and they'll dangle lucrative advertising contracts in front of them, or threaten to cancel the existing ones unless the media reports things the way the corporations want. And Peter Osborne is a man of obvious integrity, which means he'll never work in corporate media again. But he's basically blowing the whistle on the Telegraph for misreporting the HSBC story to their readers in order to preserve an advertising contract. We saw that here in the United States. Remember Prop 37 out in California, mandatory GMO labeling, and Monsanto went to every media outlet in California and said, if you do not come out opposed to this measure, we will cancel our advertising with you. Take our money someplace else. And pretty much every corporate media outlet in California said, yes, sir, Mr. Monsanto, sir, we will oppose this bill for mandatory GMO labeling. Sir. Now, the head of HSBC has issued an apology. Gee, we're sorry. We're really sorry we were helping all these drug lords and terror gangs and arms dealers and, politicians and celebrities not pay taxes at all so that you would pay more, and we're really sorry. Of course, they're still doing it. And they're relying on that whole thing about, too big to jail. Too big to jail. Even Matt Taibbi over at Rolling Stone was saying this HSBC was neck deep with drug traffickers and terrorists. Nothing happens to them. Because after all, they're bankers, and bankers are above the law in our modern world here. Well, maybe not. The Swiss police just raided HSBC's Geneva office. Now, the Swiss take their banking very seriously, and they take their banking laws very seriously because a big part of Switzerland's economy is based on banking, and they jealously guard the reputation of their banks. And so they don't care how big HSBC is. HSBC is making all the Swiss banks look bad. So they're coming down on them. The Swiss government is showing a lot more courage in this matter than the British government or the American government for that matter. Turning more to the domestic situation, over at Reader-Supported News, they've got an article which basically says elimination of the public health insurance option threw consumers to the insurance wolves. Now, before that decision was made by the United States Congress, they were all out there saying that a public option health plan was a way to keep corporate insurers honest, because there would be competition. And the corporate insurers would have to, equal or meet the performance, the cost benefit of the public insurance service. But then, of course, the insurance companies came in with their lobbyists and their checkbooks, and Congress basically said, all right, the public option is out of there. And we saw what happened. Sky-high premiums, sky-high deductibles. These Obamacare-compliant health insurance policies are not worth the paper they're written on. And they're out there demanding that you buy these things. And if you couldn't afford health insurance before, you can't afford them now, but now the IRS is coming down on you for not having the money to buy these new, more expensive policies. Now, here's a story over in Reason.com. Remember last year how they were touting, we've got 1 million, 2 million, we got 7 million, and then it turned out a lot of those numbers were fake in terms of the Obamacare enrollment. They were overhyping it See, it's a success. It's got Obama's name on it. Of course it's successful. And now they're out there, of course, saying that about 11 million Americans signed up for private health coverage this year during the enrollment period. Wow, let's see, 11 million out of 330 million. Wow, that's a resounding success, isn't it? But Bloomberg's News Health Care reporter Alex Wayne noted that the Obama administration at the end of last year didn't actually have an accurate number for how many people had signed up in 2014. They're just making up the numbers to sound good. All right. Article out of TakePart.com, How Public Relations is Killing Journalism, and it's talking about something that we've mentioned on this show many, many times. More and more of what you think is news is not just influenced by public relations firms, it is provided by them. And it's an old practice. When I was still working in advertising in Hollywood back in the 1980s, we'd see it, where these public relations firms would go out and produce a news story, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, complete tape and everything, and they would simply take the tape into the newsrooms and say, got a story for you. And the newsrooms would say, oh, great, free news story. I don't have to spend my own budget producing this. And they'd slot the tape in here, and their guy would tease the story, and, oh, new development in the world of tanning beds or something. And it would be carried not as a commercial, but as a news story. And this article over at TakePart.com is saying it's reached epidemic proportions to the point where almost everything that you're seeing in the corporate TV news that isn't government propaganda is corporate propaganda. Alrighty, we're coming up here on the top of our news break. I got one more story, and this gets back to how absurd the propaganda is getting. This is over at governmentslaves.info. And apparently there is an individual who is being brought up on terrorism charges. He was fingered by an undercover FBI agent who literally, with a straight face, said Shihab Essenghir was planning to set off the Yellowstone supervolcano in the United States to destroy the U.S. Actually came out and said, this man was going to set off the Yellowstone supervolcano. Throw him in prison. Boy. What's next? We're going to destroy the moon? Crash it to Earth? I mean, they're just really out there with all this stuff. All right, going to take a news break. I know we got a caller on the line. I'm going to have to wait till the news break is over to take that call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. And I cannot tell you all how stunned I am to find myself completely in agreement with President Barack Obama regarding terrorists and not linking them to an entire religion. And he's absolutely right. And, of course, those who are criticizing him for that position are those who are trying to gin up a war between all the Christians and all the Muslims and a holy crusade and get your Templar sword and all that other stuff. Oh, I was just about to go to this caller on the line and they just hung up. Gosh darn. All right, well, I did want to talk to you and call back in and I'll take your call. Meanwhile, just so that you know, I'm not going entirely soft on the White House right now. There was this very amazing story. It was a YouTube video where David Axelrod came out and said that he was just proud that the Obama administration hasn't had a major scandal during its first 6 years. Not counting NSA Gate, IRS Gate, EPA Gate, and several dozen other. Obamacare, that's a scandal. Anyway, speaking of NSA Gate, Western Digital, which is one of the hard drive manufacturers that have been named in this new report about built-in to the firmware backdoors, is now claiming to be completely unaware of alleged NSA spy systems built into their hard drives. They're not actually saying it doesn't exist. They're just saying, we had no idea. How can you be manufacturing something and not know what's in there? Well, to give them the benefit of the doubt, it is being manufactured several time zones away. But I'm having a real hard time accepting management's claim that they are innocent parties in all of this. Because they're either lying or they're simply not involved in the actual design and manufacture of what they're making. In any event, it's irrelevant whether management of these hard drive companies are innocent or guilty. Their products are compromised, and you should not be using them. We need to start finding hard drive manufacturers or retailers or importers in other countries if necessary. It'll be the same hard drive. It just won't have that special U.S. built-in situation. Okay, our caller has come back here. And Denny's in Illinois, aloha. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
The good story of the day, the gold coin that was found.
Coins. About 2,000 of them.
Okay, were they giving them to a museum, or do they have an amount on them yet?
As I understand it, they are now in the possession of the Israeli Archaeological Authority, which is, my experience with them is they're a pretty much stand-up organization, because they were at the forefront of exposing the fake of the pomegranate temple staff and the Jehoash tablet. And Oded Golan, that was his name. That was coming.
Okay,
so they.
Now you mentioned you were talking about the date of the coin, the BC or AD.
AD, yes.
You said they changed it to AC.
No. I misspoke because I tend to use AD when it's supposed to be CE because academics love to change things. But basically, it's the coins are.
Know if somebody changed something.
No, because the coins are from the 11th century, and the article that I linked to from WhatReallyHappened.com pointed out that area was under the control of a caliphate at the time, and I was just joking that this kind of undermines that whole "this has always been Israel" propaganda. That we've been hearing, there's no Palestine, it's always been Israel back for 2,000 years. Well, that's not Israel's name stamped on those gold coins.
Okay, so you said like 900 BC then?
Well, the range of the caliphate was from 900 AD to 1147 AD.
Oh.
That was the beginning and the end of the caliphate, and that's what the coins are saying that they were part of. But generally, they're all pretty much agreeing that it was somewhere in the 11th century here. Gold being gold, it's very hard to accurately date.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, you got it. Thank you very much for the phone call here. Getting on back to the NSA spy scandal, RINF.com has an article about how companies are being forced to try and push back against FBI surveillance. And it has to do with something called the National Security Letter, which is a government order to turn over data to federal authorities, but you're not allowed to say that you've done it. You're not even allowed to admit you got the National Security Letter. Now, this is all outside due process, because it's all supposed to be visible. You're supposed to know if the government has you under suspicion. There has to be a warrant. And the government continues to circumvent and evade and outright ignore the Bill of Rights. And so all these companies that have been getting these national security letters are starting to mount a legal challenge against them that probably will go to the United States Supreme Court, and it should, because it is unconstitutional, even without the cloak and dagger aspect of it. Now, here's a little interesting story out of governmentslaves.info. A lot of people are very concerned about the fact that when you're using a web browser, you are being tracked. If you type in a misspelling of whatreallyhappened.com, you're going to wind up at a porn site. And then, of course, the web browser tracking says, this person's looking at porn. It's not a reliable data system. Apparently, AT&T is going to offer an option to their customers to opt out of all web browser tracking for $29 per month, over and above your current bill. Isn't that special? They spy on you, and then they offer to stop spying on you if you'll pay the protection money. You pay the protection money, you get your privacy back. Now, over in Russia, Yandex has filed official complaints against Google, saying that Google is blocking other search engines and websites from Russian Android devices. And Russia's Federal Anti-Monopoly Service is starting an investigation. You're not supposed to do that. Of course, we know a lot of blocking's going on right now. People up in Canada are still emailing me. They can't find anything about the Comer lawsuit. Somebody wrote in to tell me that when they went to look at that Greatest Story Never Told video, that website was already being blocked. All of it violations of the First Amendment. And here's another shocker-rooney. Apparently, I'm in agreement with Eric Holder regarding the death penalty, because apparently he is now championing the idea, now that he's leaving the job, of a moratorium on executions. Now, in his view, this is tied up with the possible unreliability and inhumanity of lethal injection, now that other companies in other countries are refusing to sell the necessary chemicals to the United States, which has apparently lost the ability to fabricate that themselves. But in general, yeah, I think the death penalty, it's barbaric. And because our legal system is fraught with so much fraud and injustice, we know innocent people get sent to prison. We know innocent people get executed. And until we can return life to those it is wrongfully taken from, we should not take it in the first place. And that basically is that. Vermont is now getting ready to join the list of states legalizing recreational marijuana. They're looking at a bill in their state legislature that would end prohibition of the plant. So they're going one step further than Colorado. If this bill passes, you can grow limited amounts of marijuana in your own backyard. Vermont's sounding more and more like a cool place to live. Well, actually, that's a poor choice of words given the hard winter we're having. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're still hearing more of the backlash regarding the Kincora scandal, where basically there was this boys' home in Belfast, Kincora's, and apparently it was a site of a lot of the pedophilia going on, being now investigated by the British government. Huge, gigantic scandal, even worse than the Franklin scandal we had in the United States back when Bush was in the White House. And a new scandal has erupted that the police called off their investigation into Kincora at the request of MI5, who was apparently bugging the Kincora building, trying to get information on the politicians, other luminaries who are availing themselves of these services inside this building here. It's not exactly the James Bond image of British intelligence. I mean, just stop and think about this for a minute. MI5 was perfectly happy to let little children go on being sexually molested just in case they could get video of somebody important doing it. And apparently the British courts have now ruled that at least one of the victims of Kincora has a legal right to pursue claims against MI5 for having aided and abetted child sexual molestation here. Now, up in Canada, this is on CanadianDimension.com, they're saying it's time for Canada to own up to its part in this global torture scandal. And they're saying that shortly after the U.S. Senate's torture report surfaced, heavily redacted, sanitized, still don't know the worst of what went on, the Canadian government quickly denied any complicity. Oh, we don't do that sort of thing here. In fact, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister John Baird said Canada doesn't torture anyone, period. We heard exactly the same comment from Bush. The United States doesn't torture people. Well, yeah, we do. We tortured some people, according to Obama here. And, of course, the facts and evidence are showing that, yeah, Canada was neck deep in this mess. So was Great Britain. Now, also up in Canada, the leader of Coalition Avenir Quebec, François Legault, is out there saying that all mosques ought to be investigated before they're allowed to open, just because they're mosques. Okay, while we're at it, let's investigate all Christian churches for child sexual molestation before we allow them to open. Fair is fair, after all, sauce for the goose. All right. A couple of stories about police abuse here. One of the callers mentioned this. Police shoot schizophrenic man wielding a broom. Oh my goodness, he's got a broom of mass destruction. Shot him dead and then handcuffed the body afterwards. And yeah, I think those cops were on some kind of mind-bending medication if they felt they needed to handcuff a dead body. That's pretty weird. Another story reported out of Ex-Republic TV. 17-year-old girl raped in the back of a police car while handcuffed is suing the police for PTSD damages, and I hope she wins. And I hope they make the cops personally, financially liable. Plus send them to jail for rape. Now remember, you owe the police your obedience and cooperation only when the police themselves are within the letter of the law, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. The United States Supreme Court ruled in John Bad Elk versus United States that when the police are acting outside the law, you as a citizen have every right to resist, up to and including the use of lethal force. Another big scandal that's coming up here, this was reported a lot of places. I got this from Patriot Rising. This is down St. Louis, where the cops started beating up this 18-year-old man, and then one of the cops said, oh, wait a minute, the dash cam is still going. And he went to turn off the camera. Then they went back and finished beating him up. But apparently there was enough on that dash cam video where the 18-year-old man is now suing those police, and they should be made personally, financially liable for the losses, not dump them on the taxpayers. Another story here, 12160. Cops no-knock raid, stomp necks, destroy and nearly burn down the entire house, and all they found was a single broken pot pipe. And the reason the cops targeted the house is there were a lot of people coming and going. A lot of young people. Ooh, that's suspicious when a lot of young people are going in and out of this house. Well, it turns out they'd set up a music studio in their home, which they were renting to local bands to come in and make their demos. So, yeah, you're going to get a lot of musician types coming and going. The cops just went in and smashed up the place. It's amazing here. Another story out of Ex-Republic TV. Apparently the police raided a 90-year-old woman's house. Pretty much destroyed the place. Had the wrong address. Oops, our bad, we're sorry. Apparently the cops were screaming at this 90-year-old woman, where's the drugs? Where's the drugs? We know you're lying. We know you got drugs. Brought in the drug-sniffing dog. They couldn't find anything. Oops, our bad. We're sorry. Wrong address. Hope it's not too hard for you to clean up all the broken glass. Up in Canada, there's a big scandal there where apparently a high school strip-searched a teenage girl on suspicion she was carrying drugs, which, in fact, they thought she was selling drugs. And it doesn't look like they found anything, and of course the parents are very upset, and the Quebec Education Minister, Yves Bolduc, is saying, yes, high school staff are permitted to strip search students as long as it's done in a respectful fashion. I'm sorry, what's respectful about ripping the clothes off of some kid? And what are they trying to brainwash our children into accepting in the future? If I were that kid's parents, I'd be filing lawsuits. And I'd certainly move my kid into a private school to teach them how to be a human being instead of an obedient slave with no expectation of privacy and rights. All right, coming up here on a commercial break, we're going to be talking about human-caused global warming. Story out of Investment Watch blog. Winter's far from over. And by the way, I misspoke the other day. Spring officially begins March 20th. It's still a month away. So we're not out of this yet. Another deep freeze coming in. Temperatures up to 40 degrees below the average in the south and the east. More when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking once again about human-caused global warming here. And let's just skip through today's headlines. Record cold expected Thursday night in Pittsburgh. And apparently, according to this story in Investment Watch blog, Florida is looking at record low temperatures from this next round of chill. Even Miami could set a new record low by Friday. Now, here's an interesting story. This came out of USA Today. Siberian Express. Record cold attacks east and south. Ooh, it's an attack now. And the story starts, a ferocious blast of bitterly cold air straight from Siberia was roaring through the eastern and southern USA on Wednesday, dropping temperatures to historically low readings as far south as Florida. Little obvious subtext there. Oh yeah, Al Gore was right about human-caused global warming. It's those gosh darn Russians messing things up. And when I wrote that comment, I was joking. I was just kidding. And then I see this story over at Zero Hedge, and they're quoting British newspapers, the Daily Mail. This is coming from the Daily Mail. Can Russia control the weather? Climate researcher says CIA fears hostile nations are triggering floods and droughts. I mean, talk about jumping the shark. Human-caused global warming is real, honest. The Russians are causing all the cold and ice. I think the CIA is starting to use a little too much of those illegal drugs they're smuggling into this country. Of course, then, you know, that FBI agent who's out there trying to get somebody convicted on a terror charge for plotting to detonate the Yellowstone supervolcano. Do any of these people in these so-called intelligence agencies actually have a science education? Or are they all victims of Common Core mixed in with prescription psychiatric medications? Speaking of medication, story out of Natural News. The big measles lie. Eradication of measles happened before introduction of the vaccine. And they're going back and all these illnesses that were really horrible and all the vaccines that came out from them and pointing out how the vaccines hit the market after the diseases were already in decline. Same thing happened with the Salk polio vaccine. Polio was declining when the vaccine came out. Illnesses don't last forever. They go through a burn, and those who are not able to survive will die, and those who do build immunity. And the pharmaceutical industry hops on and says, oh, this new medication, this is the reason for it. Trying to take credit for something that happens naturally. I'll give you a benign example of how that works. Have you ever noticed how all the ads for exercise machines and diet aids come out in the spring? It's not because you're all getting ready for your bikini body. It's because in the springtime is when your body naturally sheds weight. You put it on during the autumn, get ready for winter. And when spring comes, your body starts getting rid of excess fat naturally. So that's a good time to sell all the pills and the machines and the special little electric suit that goes around your belly button or something. Because the customer will think it's working and go on buying the product. Meanwhile, to make up for the fact that Americans just aren't buying vaccines the way they used to, the Department of Homeland Security is stockpiling billions of dollars of experimental vaccines because the CDC and FDA said, yes, you should have these. We're going to grab a phone call here real quick. Mike in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. What's going on? Well, you made a comment here a few minutes ago about suing the police individually for killing people and stuff. If you mention that to a lawyer that can get you hundreds of thousands of dollars from the city or the county or the municipality or whoever's done it to you, if you mention going after the individual officers, they're done with you.
I understand that. They want to go where the big bucks go, but what you do is you sue the officers and the city, And you tell you tell that lawyer, look, you're going to get your money from the city, but I want that officer personally on the hook first.
They will not do that. Lawyers will not do that. They will sue the city, county, state, whatever, back into the Stone Ages. But as soon as you say, I want to hold this officer personally responsible for shooting me, it's all over. You cannot hire a lawyer.
I think you can. You just have to make it an action.
Well, maybe you know lawyers.
Hang on. You listen to me. You sue the officer and the city and the county. Then there's enough money for the lawyer to, meet his needs. But you just say, you can sue the city and the county and the state for all that you want, but you include that officer personally on the list. And they'll go for that.
You can't get representation then.
Well, I disagree with that, and I hope never to have to find out. Thank you very much for the phone call. Going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break here. All righty, another story coming out of the Express down in Great Britain here. And they're talking about this guy, Professor Rory Collins, who was part of the original research team that declared statins to be safe. And as you know, statins have come under severe criticism for causing all kinds of side effects, including death. And so Rory Collins has come out and said, well, our original research focused on, effects on the heart and some cancer risks, but didn't look at the other side effects. But not to worry, they're going to launch a new research project. And he said, this is a direct quote, additional work is needed to convince the public statins are safe. Do you get the bias going on in there? He's not checking if statins really are safe. He's out to convince the public they are safe. That's where all the big bucks in pharmacological research is. Convince everybody it works and it's safe, and we don't want to hear the bad news. And even if we do, the FDA isn't going to mention it anyway here. Story out of INFOWARS.com. Vaccine horror stories they don't want you to know. And they're talking about this vaccine industry that spends a huge amount of money bribing the corporate media talking heads to declare vaccines are 100% safe and effective, which are impossible numbers. And if you read the actual package inserts included with the vaccines, they admit that's not the case. Those vaccine inserts will say, these are dangerous, this can happen, bad things can happen. And in some cases, they'll actually admit there are no laboratory studies supporting the claim that this is effective against a particular illness. And so what you need to ask right now is, what kind of a corporate medical establishment do we have that allows children to be permanently damaged by its products for a fast buck? And what kind of a government do we have that allows children to be permanently damaged by those medical products for a fast buck? And that tells you all you really need to know about the medical industrial complex. And it's another illustration about how this lust for pieces of paper with ink on them is destroying our better qualities, our characteristics that made us proud to be Americans. Altruism, generosity, care, desire to make a good product just for the sake of making a good product. These are all being destroyed away by this sickness of greed that is contagious from the top down. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're getting an update on the situation in Ukraine. Apparently, President Poroshenko is now calling on, in fact, demanding that the United Nations and the European Union immediately send a peacekeeping force to eastern Ukraine. So basically, Poroshenko has cratered this war to reconquer the eastern Ukrainian republics. His forces are collapsing. It's a rout. And now he's screaming to the EU and UN, you got to come in, send your soldiers, save my bacon. Or in this case, save my chocolate. So, yeah, this is falling apart. This is falling apart because here's where it gets interesting. Neither the United Nations peacekeepers nor the European Union peacekeepers are mandated to change the political realities on the ground. If they come in and stop the fighting, it doesn't change the reality that the independent Eastern Ukrainian republics remain independent. They blew this one. This is a major U.S. foreign policy whoopsie. All right. Getting on back to the medical stuff, again from Natural News here. Backfire, how the vaccine industry lost the propaganda war, alienated the public, and stirred up suspicion of the entire medical profession. And absolutely, they blew it. They went out there trying to push the products, made all these claims, and then all these exposures came out about the link between mercury and autism. And the CDC got caught up in it by saying, oh, we've got a study that shows there's no link, and then the people who wrote the study said it was a fraud. And now we're looking at the package inserts where it says, yeah, actually there are harmful effects from the vaccine, and we don't actually have any laboratory tests that show it works. But you should buy it. You anti-vaxxers, it's a conspiracy there. No, it isn't. It's the modern equivalent of the Wild West traveling medicine show. The morality of the medical industry has not changed since the 1800s. It's a con game to get you to buy medicine you don't really need, that may not do anything at all. Now, Monsanto is starting to go into a panic because demand for non-GMO food is exploding. It's expected to reach $35 billion this year. And farmers who did not fall into the GMO trap, who are producing non-GMO natural crops, are selling those crops at a far higher price than the GMO farmers are able to get for their crops. That's a major problem. But Monsanto has a solution. Okay? They've gotten a bunch of mental health officials to declare the desire to eat healthy is now a mental disorder called orthorexia nervosa. It's a pathological obsession for biologically pure and healthy nutrition. If you don't want to eat chemical pap, you are mentally ill. That's it. That's their answer. If you want non-GMO food, you are mentally ill. Remember, though, Monsanto's own company cafeterias do not sell GMO food. I guess that means Monsanto's management are mentally ill, according to their own definitions, as it were. Getting on back to the VA scandal, which has never really gone away. In fact, at this point, it looks like the VA's entire efforts are all about public relations and not about actually taking care of those young Americans who got suckered into joining the military, got dumped into the latest target for invasion and conquest by the U.S., and came back damaged. And over in Colorado, one of their congressmen is calling for an investigation at the Denver Veterans Affairs Hospital after the director of the hospital threatened employees about whistleblowing, and he was caught on tape saying, once you talk to the media, you're on your own. The VA does not support you. This was Director Lynette Roth back on January 30th, saying, once you're in hot water, nobody will help you. At this point, it should be obvious. Our system is totally corrupt. Not just a little, not just on occasion. It is rotted top to bottom. When we reach a point where dangerous medications are being forced on us, when we're being told that if we want to eat healthy, natural food, that we're mentally ill, that there's something wrong with us if we have a problem with the government breaking into our computers to steal our business secrets and pictures of our girlfriends, boyfriends, lovers in scanty clothing or no clothing, that there's something wrong with us because we actually want privacy, that we object to our children being strip-searched in school, That we object to innocent people being murdered in the streets in cold blood by the police? That there's something wrong with us because we have a problem with that? No, there's nothing wrong with us at all. Because we have an inherent sense of morality and justice that says all of these things are wrong. And they're all being pursued by money junkies who want more of your money. They still think you've got plenty of it that you're not giving to them. What was it Yellen said? You're being selfish. They're money hoarders. They're keeping it in savings accounts. How dare they? Got to put it in circulation so the money junkies can grab it as it whizzes past. The human-caused global warming fraud has tarnished the reputations of government agencies most people would never have even thought capable of such things, such as NOAA, NASA. I think we would be hard put to identify any single aspect of the United States government that isn't crooked at this point. And it was dragged into that criminality by a criminal private central bank that we were sold into the slavery of by a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president 100 years ago. And I think we really do need to take a good look at what this nation and this government has become. And it's not pretty to look at. It's not pleasant. But it's the reality. We've gone past George Orwell. We watch our TVs watch us. The government is using our computers, our internet connections, our electricity to spy on us. Even in the absence of any evidence that we're doing anything wrong at all. They just want to make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. Trying to figure out a way to get all the guns, or if not the guns, at least shut off the flow of ammunition. And that one alone tells you this government has no intention of changing their behavior. Because when you reach a point of abusing somebody where they're starting to say, I'm going to fight back, the wise and prudent course of action is you back off the abusive behavior. You say, all right, maybe we won't take so much of your money. Maybe we won't force you to buy these exorbitantly priced health insurance policies with the sky-high premiums. Maybe we'll let you decide what vaccines your children will or will not have. But when they continue screaming about the need to disarm the law-abiding public with this botched theory that this is in any way going to interfere with criminals getting guns, it's telegraphing. They have no intention of changing their behavior. The predatory banking will go on. Wall Street fraud will go on. Massive election fraud will go on. The wars will go on. Servitude to Israel will go on. They're telling us things will not get better. Things are on their way to worse by design. There's the music. Time for me to get some animation work done this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Get angry. I give you permission. Share what you know with who you know. Please support Genesis Communication. Please support WhatReallyHappened.com. Every little bit helps. Corporate media gets millions of dollars to lie to you. We're telling you the truth for pennies. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.